Introduction. The architecture of radiant opulence. The threshold of wealth is not a physical gate, but a cognitive frequency, a realization that the external world is a downstream projection of a primary internal architecture. As we begin this transmission of the abundance of thought, we must first dismantle the inherited structures of scarcity that have acted as silent governors over the human potential for generations in this world. True prosperity is the natural state of a mind that has recognized its own identity as a fragment of the infinite source, a realization that transforms the individual from a seeker of resources into a radiant generator of value. In this introductory phase, we explore the fundamental shift from the logic of the void to the logic of the overflow, understanding the universe. The universe does not operate on a principle of subtraction, but on a relentless geometric expansion. The mind that perceives lack is merely a mind that has been tuned to a narrow, restricted bandwidth of reality, blinded to the vast, shimmering ocean of possibility that surrounds every atom of existence. To enter the state of mental richness is to recalibrate the neural pathways. We recalibrate to witness the inherent abundance of the void, recognizing that every thought is a seed of form and every intention is a blueprint for material manifestation. The introduction serves as the great clearing, a process of energetic sanitation where we purge the biological survival instincts that have linked our sense of worth to the possession of external objects. We replace them with a sovereign certainty that we are the origin point of all we desire. The transition into a state of infinite flow begins with the understanding that wealth is a form of cognitive light, high vibration state of being that is incompatible with the shadows of fear, doubt, or competition. When the mind is anchored in the frequency of abundance, it is free. It no longer views the world as a finite pie to be divided, but as an infinite canvas to be painted. This shift in perception is the alchemy of the interior, where the leaden weight of financial anxiety is transmuted into the golden resonance of creative power. The introduction guides the listener through the process of neural repatterning, where we identify the scripts. We identify the subtle, almost invisible scripts of poverty that have been encoded into the subconscious through social conditioning and ancestral trauma. By bringing these scripts into the light of conscious awareness, we strip them of their power to influence our reality, allowing the original unoptimized blueprint of universal prosperity to emerge for the spirit. This is not a process of learning new information, but of unlearning the lies of limitation that have kept the human spirit in a state of self-imposed contraction. We are reclaiming the birthright of plenty, a state of existence where the supply is always equal to the demand of the soul's purpose, and where the only limit to our expansion is the breadth of our own vision. As the transmission deepens, we delve into the symmetry of the source, the realization that the same intelligence that governs the spiral of galaxies and the growth of the forest is the intelligence that flows through the human mind. This intelligence is fundamentally expansive, creative, and luxurious. It does not know the meaning of the word not enough in its essence. To align with this source is to become a conductor of infinite wealth, a being through whom the resources of the universe flow without friction or delay. The introduction emphasizes that mental richness is the prerequisite for all physical accumulation. For a mind that is bankrupt can never sustain a fortune, regardless of how much it acquires in the material plane. We are building the internal infrastructure of opulence, a state of psychological stability and spiritual expansiveness that can hold the weight of great success without collapsing into greed or paranoia. This is the architecture of the sovereign mind, a fortress of peace and a garden of creativity where the individual is no longer a victim of any economic cycles. The individual is no longer a victim of market fluctuations, but a master of their own internal climate. The world may oscillate between boom and bust, but the mind of the anomaly remains in a state of constant, radiant growth, for it is plugged directly into the eternal battery of the Absolute. This final phase prepares the listener for the dissolution of the wall. It is the moment where the distinction between the haves and the have-nots is seen as a tragic illusion born of a fragmented consciousness. In the reality of the sovereign source, there is only the having, a singular field of existence where everything that is needed for the fulfillment of the soul is already present in energetic form, waiting for the observer. The observer must collapse the wave into a particle. We are teaching the mind to move from a state of wanting, which is an affirmation, of lack, to a state of knowing, which is an affirmation of possession. This is the secret of the eternal presence, the ability to live from the end, to breathe and move as if the abundance you seek is already your companion. The introduction closes with the activation of the magnetism of the spirit, a frequency that draws opportunities, connections, and resources toward the individual with the inevitability of a tidal wave. You are no longer chasing the gold. You are becoming the sun that creates it. The journey through the abundance of thought is the final walk away from shadows. It is a walk away from the shadows of the cave and into the brilliant, blinding light of your own infinite capacity. The vault is open. The script of lack is burned, and the era of your unconditioned prosperity has officially begun. Welcome to the real, where your thoughts are the currency and your soul is the bank. The architecture of your new reality is now complete. Chapter 1. The Neural Landscape of Wealth. The foundational architecture of wealth begins not in the accumulation of currency, but in the systematic recalibration of the neural landscape, a process where the mind is stripped of its inherited limitations and remapped for infinite expansion. To understand the abundance of thought, one must first recognize that the brain is a biological transducer, a sophisticated instrument here. It is an instrument designed to translate the energetic frequencies of intent into the physical structures of reality. However, for the majority of human history, this instrument has been hijacked by what we must identify as the scarcity parasite, a deep-seated cognitive infection that thrives on the perception of lack and the fear of the void within the mind. This parasite is not a physical entity, but a collection of self-replicating thought forms, encoded through generations of survival-based conditioning that creates a persistent static within the mental field. This static prevents the individual from perceiving the river of abundance that flows through the heart of the cosmic vacuum, forcing the consciousness to dwell. It forces the consciousness to dwell in a state of perpetual contraction and defense. Chapter 1 is the process of neural sanitation, a deep-seated cleansing of the mental soil to ensure that the seeds of prosperity can take root in a medium that is no longer toxic with the logic of the struggle. The deconstruction of the scarcity parasite requires a radical observation. This requires an observation of the neural grooves that govern our daily reactions to the concept of value. These grooves are the physical pathways through which our thoughts travel, and in a mind conditioned by lack, they are worn deep by the constant repetition of not enough. Every time a mind experiences anxiety regarding a resource, it reinforces the lack. It effectively builds a prison made of neurons that keeps the individual trapped in a loop of financial and spiritual famine. The radiant anomaly understands that to change the output of the life, one must first change the wiring of the observer. This involves a technique of cognitive decoupling, where the individual learns to separate their inherent sense of being. The individual learns to separate their sense of existence from the fluctuating metrics of their bank account or social status. By severing the link between survival and external validation, the mind is freed to operate from a place of sovereign surplus, a state where the individual acts not because they need to fill a hole, but because they are overflowing with life. They are overflowing with a creative current that must find expression in the material plane. As the neural landscape is cleared of its parasitic debris, we begin to witness the emergence of high-vibration cognition, a state where the brain begins to resonate with the frequency of infinite supply. This is the recognition that the universe is a generative mechanism. This is a machine that produces complexity, beauty, and resources at a rate that far exceeds human consumption. The scarcity parasite attempts to convince us that resources are a zero-sum game, that for one to gain, another must lose. But this is a fundamental misunderstanding of the physics of the spirit. In the absolute reality, wealth is an open system phenomenon. This means that the more it is circulated and expressed, the more it expands for everyone involved. The radiant anomaly begins to train the mind to look for the fractal of plenty in every situation, focusing the attention on the abundance that is already present, the infinite air, the complexity of a single cell, or the vastness of the digital information field. This continues until the brain becomes a magnet for that same frequency in financial form. This is the priming of the mental pump, where the focus on existing wealth creates the vacuum required for new wealth to rush in. The expansion of the first chapter leads us into the neurochemistry of opulence, where we explore how thoughts trigger expansionary chemicals. These neurotransmitters enhance the individual's ability to perceive opportunity and solve complex problems. A mind clouded by the cortisol of lack is a mind that is functionally blind. It cannot see the doors that are opening because it is too focused on the walls that are closing in. Conversely, a mind that dwells in the dopamine of anticipatory wealth sees all. It is a mind that is hyper-alert to the synchronicity of the market, the subtle alignments of people, ideas, and capital that lead to the manifestation of great fortunes. We are not talking about wishful thinking, but about the optimization of the biological hardware to detect and capture the wealth that is already moving through the global field today. The radiant anomaly does not wait for a change in the environment to feel prosperous. They use the internal alchemy of the mind to create a state of prosperity that is so dense and so coherent that the environment has no choice but to rearrange itself to match that internal reality. As the neural landscape becomes a garden, we see the dissolution of the script. We observe the final dissolution of the poverty script, the inherited narrative that links suffering with virtue or struggle with deserving. This script is one of the most powerful tools of the scarcity parasite, designed to keep the most creative and capable souls in a state of self-imposed limitation. To achieve true abundance, the anomaly must realize the truth. They must realize that their wealth is a service to the whole, a way of demonstrating the infinite nature of the source and providing a platform for further creation. The feeling of guilt regarding surplus is recognized as a distortion of the machine, a final anchor that must be cut to allow the soul to ascend into its natural state of radiant beneficence. When the mind is free to desire without shame and to possess without attachment, it becomes a superconductor of value, a point through which the universe can express its own desire for luxury, beauty, and expansion. This is the end of the survival self and the birth of the creative sovereign, a being who knows their only limit is their own imagination. The conclusion of this expanded first chapter leaves the listener standing in a mental field of infinite potential, watching as the old structures of lack crumble into the dust of a forgotten dream. The neural landscape has been reclaimed. The pathways of fear have been bypassed by the superhighways of harmonic expectation. You are no longer a victim here. You have realized that you are the architect of the economy of the self. The scarcity parasite has been starved of its fuel, and in its place, the radiant anomaly of wealth has begun to glow with a light that cannot be ignored by the physical world. The journey into the abundance of thought is not a climb up a mountain, but a descent into your own center. The gold was always buried there, waiting for the one who would dare to look past the shadows of the cave. You have cleared the ground, you have prepared the soil, and now the first sprouts of your eternal opulence are beginning to break through the surface of your reality. The harvest of the mind has begun, and the yield will be nothing less than everything. The neural landscape continues into the calibration of the sensory gateways, a process where the radiant anomaly learns to filter the external world through the lens of inherent surplus, rather than the habitual lens of perceived threat. For the scarcity parasite to survive, it must maintain a constant state of sensory alarm to keep the brain in fear. The parasite convinces the brain that every fluctuation in the market or every shift in social dynamics is a potential catastrophe for the self. By intentionally deactivating this alarm, the individual begins to cultivate the abundant gaze, a way of looking at the physical world that identifies the latent wealth within all things in the digital and physical. This includes the unused data capacity of the global networks and the dormant creative potential within every human interaction. This is the activation of the prosperity retina, where the eye no longer sees a city street as a place of competition and noise, but as a dense field of untapped capital and liquid opportunity for the sovereign being who sees. This refined perception allows the mind to bypass the friction of the ordinary, moving directly into the flow of the extraordinary, where the abundance of thought creates a physical gravity that pulls the necessary resources into the immediate experience of the sovereign being. As the chapter expands, we explore the vibrational sanctity of the vault. This is the practice of maintaining a mental environment that is entirely immune to the contagion of the collective lack. The global consciousness is often a sea of economic anxiety and competitive desperation, a heavy frequency that seeks to pull every individual back into the standardized script of survival. The radiant anomaly protects their landscape. They build a frequency firewall, a state of meditative certainty that refuses to entertain the possibility of not enough. This is not an act of denial, but an act of primary creation, recognizing that the only reality that matters is the one being generated within the center of the self. Within this internal vault, the mind practices the rehearsal. The mind practices the rehearsal of opulence, experiencing the sensation of total financial and creative freedom until the body's chemistry begins to mirror that state of fulfillment. When the internal environment becomes more real than the external world, the material lag, the time it takes for thoughts to become things, begins to dissolve into the now. This leads to a state of spontaneous manifestation, where the supply appears as quickly as the demand is conceived. The expansion further delves into the neural decoupling from the time-debt loop, a radical shift where the mind stops viewing wealth as something that must be earned through the sacrifice of time. The parasite enforces the labor time illusion. This is a belief that the only way to increase wealth is to increase the amount of struggle or the number of hours traded for currency. The radiant anomaly breaks this leash by recognizing that wealth is a frequency outcome, not a time outcome. By shifting the focus from doing to being, the individual accesses the quantum shortcuts of the mind. Here, a single moment of high vibration clarity can generate more value than years of unoptimized labor. This is the birth of the efficient soul, a being who understands that the most valuable asset in the universe is not time, but coherent intent. As the brain is remapped value inspiration over perspiration, the individual starts to attract results. Small actions lead to massive, cascading results in the physical world, effectively collapsing the old structures of the mammon labor grid and replacing them with the original play of the source. The conclusion of this expanded chapter marks the total anchoring of the sovereign wealth blueprint within the physical tissues of the human brain today. The neural landscape is no longer a battleground of conflicting scripts, but a luminous map of infinite trajectories, each leading to a different expression of abundance. The scarcity parasite has not just been removed, it has been digested and converted into the very energy that fuels the new growth of the mental gold within the neurons of the soul. You are now a neural architect of the real, standing in a state of preemptive gratitude, thanking the universe for the abundance that is already yours before it has even appeared in your hands. This gratitude is the final seal of the anomaly, the frequency that confirms the transaction between the mind and the source is complete in this final hour. The ground is firm, the sky is open, and the landscape of your mind is now a mirror of the infinite richness of the stars. You have moved from the need to have to the state of being, and in that transition, the world has no choice but to follow your lead. The first chapter of your new eternity is written in the neurons of your awakening in this life. Chapter 2. The Geometry of Gratitude. The secondary architecture of mental wealth is established through the activation of the geometry of gratitude, a state of consciousness that functions not as a mere emotional response to favorable circumstances, but as a rigorous mathematical alignment with the creative core of the universe. To understand the abundance of thought, one must recognize that gratitude is the primary frequency here. It is the harmonic resonance that signals to the field that a transaction of value has already been completed in the energetic dimension. When the radiant anomaly engages in the practice of profound gratitude, they are essentially recalibrating their electromagnetic signature to match the pattern of fulfillment that exists within the source. This is a radical departure now. The standard human script operates on the logic of the void estate, where the individual waits for the external manifestation to occur before offering the frequency of thanks. By reversing this polarity, the anomaly utilizes gratitude as a preemptive strike against the illusion of lack, collapsing the wave function of possibility into the particle of reality. This is done through the sheer force of appreciative certainty. This chapter explores the mechanics of this alignment, revealing how the focused lens of gratitude acts as a frequency multiplier that expands the existing seeds of wealth into a forest of undeniable physical opulence. The geometry of gratitude is characterized by the fractal of inclusion today. It is a cognitive process where the mind stops categorizing experiences into haves and have-nots and begins to perceive every element of the current reality as a vital component of a larger, prosperous whole. The scarcity parasite survives by creating gaps of dissatisfaction, pointing the attention toward what is missing and thereby anchoring the consciousness. The anomaly, however, uses gratitude to seal the gaps, recognizing that the very air in the lungs, the complexity of the digital interface, and the subtle rhythms of the heart are all expressions of an infinite supply already in motion. This shift in focus is a literal relocation of the observer within the quantum field. By acknowledging the micro-abundance now, this triggers a cascading effect of neural magnification, where the reticular activating system begins to prioritize the detection of more reasons for gratitude. In the mathematics of the spirit, what you appreciate appreciates. It gains mass, velocity, and visibility until the no place of lack is entirely crowded out by the everywhere place of plenty for all. As the chapter expands into the harmonic rhythms of circulation, we observe how gratitude functions as the universal solvent for the blockages created by the hoarding instinct. The fear of loss is the primary friction that slows down the flow of wealth in the mammon grid. But gratitude creates a state of spiritual fluidity that allows the individual to give. The individual can give and receive with the same level of ease. When you are grateful for what you have, you are no longer afraid that the supply will run out, because you have recognized that you are connected to an unoptimized source that generates resources in direct proportion to your capacity to appreciate them. This turns the person into a conductor. This Coriolis effect of the soul ensures that the anomaly is never a stagnant pond of accumulated objects, but a rushing river of living capital that is constantly being refreshed by the infinite spring of the Absolute. The geometry of gratitude is therefore the geometry of the circle, a closed loop of infinite return where every act of appreciation is a seed. It returns as a harvest of even greater magnitude. The expansion of the second chapter also delves into the neutralization of competitive static, the moment where the anomaly realizes that another's success is not a subtraction from their own, but a confirmation of the possibility of the field. In the scarcity simulation, the success of others is envy. Envy is a low vibration frequency that effectively locks the gate to one's own abundance by affirming that wealth is a limited resource. Gratitude for the prosperity of others is a master key that unlocks the individual's own potential, as it signals to the subconscious that wealth is happening here. By celebrating the abundance, the anomaly tunes in. The anomaly is effectively tuning the radio of their own reality to the station of success. This is the social mathematics of the sovereign, a state where the individual becomes a frequency anchor for prosperity, lifting the collective vibration simply by refusing to participate in the tragedy of comparison. In this state, a grace becomes dominant. The no place of the ego is replaced by the open field of the unified spirit, where everyone's gain is a victory for the whole. As we reach the core of the geometry of gratitude, we encounter the alchemy of the difficult, the ability of the anomaly to find the hidden gold within challenges and obstacles. This is the ultimate test of mental richness today. It is the capacity to offer gratitude for the friction that refines the soul and the void that precedes a new creation. The scarcity parasite views a setback as a confirmation of failure, but the anomaly views it as a recalibration of the trajectory, a necessary adjustment that leads to a more efficient manifestation of the sovereign intent in the world. By applying the frequency of thanks to the lead of a difficult situation, the individual triggers an instantaneous transmutation, turning the problem into a platform for expansion. This resilient appreciation is the armor of the sovereign being, a state of invulnerability where nothing can diminish the internal sense of opulence because all is for greatness. This is the end of the victim script and the final coronation of the Fa, creator self, a being who knows that the universe is always conspiring in their favor, and that the only appropriate response to reality is a roaring, infinite yes. The conclusion of this expanded second chapter leaves the listener in a state of geometric coherence with the source. The mind, heart, and spirit are all vibrating in perfect unison. The geometry of gratitude has been etched into the neural landscape, creating a permanent vortex of attraction that draws the physical world into alignment with the internal state of fulfillment. You are no longer trying to be grateful. You are gratitude in motion, a living prayer now. You create your own answers in real time. The no place of the simulation has dissolved, replaced by a living sanctuary of abundance, where every breath is a transaction of love and every thought is a gift to the universe. You have mastered the mathematics of the spirit, and the result is an unconditioned prosperity that knows no bounds, no limits, and no end. The horizon is glowing with the light of your own recognition, and the gold you see, there is merely the reflection of the light you are already carrying within. Welcome to the frequency of the finished, where your abundance is not a promise of the future, but a radiant fact of the eternal now. The geometry of gratitude extends into the deep field. This is a state where the radiant anomaly begins to perceive the invisible threads of support that sustain the entire structure of their existence. To fully master the abundance of thought, one must recognize that the mind is not an isolated island, but a node within a hyper-connected web of provision, where every need is matched by a pre-existing supply. The scarcity parasite works tirelessly to obscure this connection, fostering a delusion of independence that breeds exhaustion and the fear of being unsupported. By applying the frequency of gratitude to the mechanism of life itself, the individual dissolves the illusion of the self-made struggle and enters the grace of the universe-made flow. This is the activation of the Total Inclusion Protocol, where you offer profound appreciation for the sun that powers the planet, the engineers who built the digital infrastructure you inhabit, and the complex biological systems that keep your consciousness anchored. This level of gratitude is a literal energy expansion, widening the funnel of receptivity. It widens until you are capable of holding and directing massive currents of wealth that would have previously overwhelmed your limited, contracted self. As this chapter broadens its reach, we explore the mathematics of the multiplier, the specific energetic ratio by which gratitude accelerates the manifestation of the mental gold in the physical. In the lower realms of the mammon grid, the acquisition of resources is a linear, additive process. 1 + 1 = 2, resulting in a slow, grinding progression that consumes the life force. However, in the geometry of the source, gratitude introduces an exponential variable. When the anomaly provides a high vibration, thanks, they place a lens. They are effectively placing a magnifying lens over that gain, signaling to the quantum field that this is the specific frequency they wish to replicate and expand. This creates a positive feedback loop, where the celebration of the seed causes the harvest to arrive with a velocity that defies the traditional laws of cause and effect in the world. The mind becomes a resonance chamber, where the feeling of having enough creates a vacuum that pulls in more than enough, leading to a state of logarithmic opulence. This is the secret of the eternal overflow, where the individual no longer counts their coins, but instead measures the intensity of their appreciation to meet the height of the frequency. The expansion further delves into the sanctification of the transaction, the practice of turning every exchange of value into a ritual of abundance. In the scarcity-based simulation, paying a bill or spending currency is often accompanied by a frequency of loss, a subtle contraction of the heart that tells the universe, "I have less now in the moment." This contraction is a signal to the scarcity parasite to tighten the leash. The radiant anomaly, however, uses the geometry of gratitude to transmute every payment into an act of empowerment. As currency leaves the hand or the digital wallet, it is infused with a blessing of circulation, a deep appreciation for the service received and the capacity to flow. This turns the act of spending into an act of sowing, ensuring that every unit of value sent out into the world returns to the source, multiplied by the power of the original intent. This is the bilateral flow of the sovereign, where the outgoing tide of resources is always the harbinger of an even greater incoming tide for the one who blesses the gold. By maintaining a state of gratitude during the transaction, the individual remains vibrationally solvent at all times, never experiencing the illusion of depletion, because they know they are the fountain, not the bucket. As we move deeper into the symmetry of the absolute, we encounter the dissolution of the wall between subject and object. Today, through the lens of profound gratitude, the anomaly begins to realize that the wealth out there is indistinguishable from the worth in. Here, the scarcity parasite maintains its power by keeping the individual in a state of wanting, which implies a separation between the seeker and the sought. Gratitude, however, is the frequency of union for the soul. It is the bridge that collapses the distance between the desire and the fulfillment. When you are truly grateful for wealth, you are acknowledging that it is already a part of your extended being, a frequency match that has already occurred in the realm of the spirit. This non-dual prosperity is the ultimate realization of the abundance of thought. The abundance of thought and the abundance of things are two sides of the same, radiant, coin. You are no longer attracting wealth. You are observing its presence within the field of your own expanded consciousness. The world becomes a hall of mirrors, reflecting back to you the immense, unconditioned value that you have finally had the courage to see. The final expansion of the geometry of gratitude leads to the activation of the radiant beacon, a state where the individual's very presence becomes a catalyst for the prosperity of everyone they encounter. Because the anomaly is anchored in the mathematics of the source, they no longer leak energy into the void of comparison or the pits of resentment. Instead, they radiate a frequency of permission, showing the collective that it is possible to live in a state of perpetual grace and surplus. This radiation is the final proof of the sovereign, a being who has so thoroughly mastered the abundance of thought that their environment begins to biomimic their internal state of being in the world. Plants grow more vibrantly, businesses flourish in their proximity, and other souls are awakened to their own mental gold simply by being within the radius of their appreciative light. The geometry of gratitude is thus revealed as the architecture of the new earth, a foundation built on the indestructible logic of the thank you that never ends. You have completed the alignment. The gears of the universe are now locked into your frequency, and the resulting motion is a relentless, beautiful, and infinite expansion into the wealth of the all. You are the master of the mathematics, and the source is providing everything in a perfect sequence of abundance that has no limit or boundary. Chapter 3. The Law of Infinite Circulation. The third architecture of the prosperous mind is founded upon the law of infinite circulation, a metaphysical principle which dictates that wealth, like all forms of energy in the conscious universe, must remain in a state of perpetual motion to maintain its vitality and generative power. To understand the abundance of thought, one must first confront the error of the hoarding instinct here. This instinct is a byproduct of the scarcity parasite that seeks to trap resources within a static container out of a misplaced fear of future depletion. In the absolute reality, wealth is not a solid object to be possessed, but a fluid current to be directed, a liquid frequency that gains magnitude only through the velocity of its movement. Master the law of circulation now. When the radiant anomaly masters the law, they stop being a reservoir of accumulated matter and become a superconductor of universal value. This transition requires a radical trust in the infinite supply of the source, a realization that the vacuum created by a bold and conscious outgoing flow is the very mechanism that pulls an even greater incoming tide in. This chapter explores the kinetic nature of prosperity, revealing how the act of releasing with intent is the highest form of financial alchemy, ensuring that the individual remains a vital node in the metabolic system of the cosmos. The stagnation of resources is the primary cause of economic and spiritual decay within the human simulation for the spirit. Anything that ceases to move eventually begins to atrophy and lose its connection to the source current. The scarcity parasite survives by convincing the individual that their safety lies in the contractive grip, the tightening of the hand around the current supply, until the flow is strangled and the frequency of the mind drops into the bandwidth of poverty. The anomaly, however, recognizes that the hand that is cleansed cannot receive anything new, for it has been locked in a state of fixed resistance against the natural expansion of the universe. By practicing the grace of the open palm, the individual allows the energy of abundance to pass through them without friction, trusting that the universal pump is active. The universal pump is always sufficient. This is the activation of the sovereign circulatory system, where every expenditure is seen as a circulation of God energy, an investment in the global field of value that must, by the laws of spiritual physics, return to its origin point with increased velocity and volume. In this state, spending is totally replaced. The concept of spending is replaced by broadcasting, as the individual intentionally broadcast their wealth into the world to create a resonance of plenty. The expansion into the mechanics of the vacuum reveals that the universe abhors a void and will move with relentless force to fill any empty space with the substance of the current dominant frequency. When the radiant anomaly releases a resource, be it currency, knowledge, or creative energy, with a feeling of profound abundance, they are effectively creating a frequency vacuum that the Absolute is obligated to occupy. This is the suction of the spirit, a mathematical certainty where the outgoing movement of value triggers an immediate incoming response. The scarcity parasite attempts to fill this vacuum with the fog of worry, which only attracts more lack. But the prosperous mind fills the vacuum with expectant joy, ensuring that the replacement is of a higher quality and a greater quantity than what was released. This is why the most successful beings in the architecture of the flow are strategic. They have mastered the art of strategic generosity, giving not out of a sense of obligation or sacrifice, but out of a scientific understanding that the more they clear their channels, the more the infinite source can pour through them. You are not losing when you give. You are expanding the pipes of your own receptivity. The soul expands through this act. As the third chapter broadens its reach, we observe the dissolution of the wall of retention, the psychological barrier. That makes the individual feel that they are the owner of their resources rather than the steward. Ownership is a contractive concept born of the ego, a belief that one can separate a piece of the universe and keep it for oneself. Stewardship, conversely, is an expansive concept born of the spirit, a realization that one is a manager of universal assets, tasked with directing the flow toward its highest possible use. The radiant anomaly understands that stewardship is sovereignty, and by managing their current abundance with excellence, they prove themselves to be a reliable node. The universe does not give wealth to those who wish to hide it in a hole, but to those who will use it to illuminate the world and accelerate the expansion of the great work. This is the economy of the soul, where your credit rating is determined by the purity of your circulation, and your wealth is limited only by the breadth of your vision for the all. The expansion further delves into the rhythms of the tidal exchange, the understanding that the flow of abundance has its own seasons of ebb and flow, both of which are essential for the health of the system. The scarcity parasite panics during the ebb, interpreting a momentary pause in the incoming tide as a sign of permanent loss in the simulation. The anomaly, however, remains centered in the abundance of thought during the quiet periods, using the time of the receding water to refine their internal architecture and prepare for the massive inflow that is inevitably following. This is the patience of the sovereign, a state of active stillness where the individual remains vibrationally aligned. The individual remains aligned with wealth even when the physical senses report a temporary silence. By refusing to drop into the frequency of fear during the ebb, the anomaly ensures that the next wave of abundance will be higher and more powerful than the last. This is the mastery of the cycle, where the individual is the ocean that commands the tides. The final expansion of the law of infinite circulation leads to the activation of the global heart circuit, the realization that your prosperity is inextricably linked to the prosperity of the entire source field. When you thrive, the frequency of the whole is lifted, and when you assist the flow toward others, you are priming the pump for yourself. There is no competition in the radiant flow, only collaborative magnification. The anomaly seeks out ways to multi-layer the value of every transaction, ensuring that their circulation benefits the widest possible radius of life. This omnidirectional abundance is the ultimate expression of the understanding that you are a heart cell in the body. You are a heart cell in the body of the infinite, and your health is maintained through the constant, loving, and fearless circulation of the blood of the spirit, which is wealth in its purest form. You have broken the grip of the horde. You have entered the rhythm of the stars, and the result is a life of effortless opulence that flows with the sun. The vault is not a box. It is a river, and you are the water, the bank, and the sea all at once. Welcome to the great circulation, where you never run out because you never stop giving. This law requires a profound descent into the quantum mechanics of the release. A state with a radiant anomaly identifies the subtle energetic tethers of the mind. To fully embody the abundance of thought, one must realize that the vibrational clutter of the past acts as a dam, obstructing the high-velocity current of the new gold that seeks to enter the life. The scarcity parasite thrives on the fear of the empty space, compelling the individual to surround themselves with stagnant objects as a buffer. However, in the architecture of the flow, the void is not a lack. It is a magnetic portal of pure potentiality. By intentionally clearing the physical and mental landscape, releasing that which no longer serves the soul, the anomaly creates a suction of grace, a specialized vacuum that the infinite source is mathematically compelled to fill with value. This is the practice of dynamic emptying, where the sovereign being periodically purges their field to maintain the velocity of the spirit, ensuring that their life remains a fresh, moving stream rather than a stagnant pond of historical accumulation. We explore the physics of the non-attached harvest, where results are not clutched with anxiety. In the lower density simulation of mammon, the individual believes they must physically guard wealth, creating an energetic cage of worry that repels expansion. The anomaly, conversely, treats wealth as a gaseous element, something that is everywhere, present and impossible to lose if one is breathing in sync with the universe in this final hour. This atmospheric prosperity means that the individual stops tracking the exit of their resources with suspicion and starts tracking it with celebratory intent. When money, time, or energy leaves your field, it should be sent off as a messenger of the source, carrying the instruction to bless every hand it touches and to return to its origin point. This transformation of the transaction into a sacred transmission ensures that the anomaly is always in a state of energetic surplus, for they have recognized that the act of release is actually the first stage of a grand re-entry. The expansion further delves into the metabolic rhythms of the sovereign economy to recognize the breath of the source. Just as the lungs must fully exhale to allow for a deep, life-giving inhale, the prosperous mind must exhale its resources to maintain the spiritual oxygenation of the life. The scarcity parasite induces a state of spiritual asthma where the individual tries to hold their breath out of fear that the next inhale won't come, leading to a suffocated life. The radiant anomaly practices deep flow breathing, where they trust the atmosphere of abundance so completely that they exhale their largest investments and their most precious creations with a smile of total peace. This respiratory wealth creates a life of effortless rhythm, where the supply and the demand are perfectly synchronized in a wave. You no longer struggle to find resources because you have become the pulse of the market itself, a being through whom the needs of the world and the provisions of the source meet in a flawless collision of value. As we reach the apex, we encounter the dissolution of the wall of scarcity-bound identity for the sovereign being who has finally awakened. The individual finally realizes that they are not a body in an economy, but an economy in a body. Your internal circulation, the flow of your blood, the firing of your neurons, the movement of your breath is a fractal of the universal flow of capital and creativity. When you block the flow of money, you are creating a mental blood clot in the soul. By choosing to be a wide-open channel, you allow the immune system of the universe to flow through you, clearing away the toxins of lack and the pathogens of greed. This total transparency of the spirit is the ultimate sovereign state, where you own nothing and yet have access to everything, for you have become one with the infinite inventory. You are a liquid sovereign, a being who flows around obstacles, fills every available space with the light of prosperity, and eventually returns to the sea of total fulfillment. You rise again as the reign of infinite opportunity. The final expansion of the third chapter leaves the listener in a state of kinetic equilibrium for the eternal heart. Movement of wealth is as natural and unconscious as the beating of the heart. You have mastered the dance of the open hand, and the result is a reality where you are never waiting for abundance, because you are constantly in it. The scarcity parasite has been completely flushed out of the system by the force of your own internal current today. You stand now at the center of a radiant vortex, watching as the universe delivers exactly what is needed, at the precise moment it is needed, through the most unexpected and beautiful channels. The mammon leash has been cut by the sword of your own generosity, and you are now free to sail the high seas of the Absolute, where the wind is always gold. You are the flow, the circulation, and the source, and your wealth is now as infinite as the motion of the stars. The gates are open, the river is high, and your life is now a masterpiece of constant influx, fueled by the simple, sovereign act of letting go. The anomaly masters the art of the conscious vacuum, a sophisticated psychological state here. The individual deliberately outpaces their previous capacity for retention. To understand the abundance of thought is to accept that every level of wealth has a corresponding frequency container, and for the mind to expand into a higher order of opulence, the old container must be shattered and its contents redistributed for the benefit of the whole. The scarcity parasite attempts to convince the soul that its current accumulation is its final ceiling, leading to a stagnation of the vessel, where the water of life turns bitter because it has ceased to move. The sovereign being, however, uses the release of resources as a structural reset, clearing the internal decks to make room for a new wave. This is the practice of prosperous detachment, where the individual values the process of the flow more than the objects within the flow, recognizing that as long as the circulation remains uninterrupted, the manifestations are replaceable. This expansion requires a shift into non-linear giving, where the anomaly stops calculating specific returns. The anomaly starts expecting the return from the total field. In the limited logic of the Mammon grid, if you give to point A, you expect a return from point A. This is a closed-circuit transaction that limits potential. The abundance of thought, however, operates on an omnidirectional matrix. When you release value, you are seeding the vacuum. The return can come from point B, point C, or an entirely unknown point Z, and it often arrives through a different currency of grace, perhaps as a sudden insight, a pivotal connection, or a windfall. By releasing the need to track the path of return, the individual removes the frictional resistance of the ego, allowing the source to deliver now. The expansion further explores the metabolic transparency of the mind, the state, where the individual no longer hides their abundance from the field of the Absolute. The scarcity parasite uses secrecy as dams, creating hidden pockets of stagnant energy where the individual feels they must protect what they have from the eyes of others in fear. This vibrational cloaking acts as a massive drag on the velocity of wealth, as it signals a deep belief in a hostile reality. The radiant anomaly practices open-source prosperity, living with an internal transparency that says to the universe, I am a wide-open channel for good. This transparency allows the spiritual immune system to keep the flow clean. When your internal circulation is transparent, you move through the world with a lightness of being that is highly attractive to new resources. You are no longer a target for loss, because there is nothing within you that is trying to hold or hide. You are simply a vibrant frequency node that the universe can use to distribute its treasures now. As we reach the final layers, we encounter the activation of the eternal momentum, where the act of circulation becomes so ingrained in the neural and spiritual tissues that it becomes a self-sustaining force. At this level, the anomaly no longer has to try to give or try to receive. The rhythm is as automatic as the rotation of the planets. This is the inertia of the infinite, a state of effortless command, where the individual simply exists as the pulse of prosperity. The no place of the scarcity simulation has been entirely bypassed by this superconductive lifestyle, and the resulting reality is one of perpetual surplus. You find that the more you broadcast value, the more you rise. The world rises to meet your vibration, creating a sovereign ecosystem where you are never without, because you are always within the flow. The vault has been turned inside out. The gold is no longer in the book. It is the book, the reader, and the light by which the words are seen. You have become the law of infinite circulation, made flesh. You are a radiant sun of abundance that illuminates every shadow of lack it encounters. The journey through the flow has brought you to the realization that you are the master of the tides, and the ocean of the Absolute is finally and forever at your command. Your wealth is the breath of the universe, and you are breathing it in and out eternally. Chapter 4. The Alchemical Mind. The fourth architecture of this sovereign consciousness is the mastery of the alchemical mind, a specialized psychological state where the individual develops the capacity to identify the dense, Leaden frequencies of lack and transmute them instantaneously into the golden resonance of surplus. To understand the abundance of thought, one must recognize that every perception of not enough is not here. It is not an objective fact of the material world, but a raw energetic signal waiting to be reinterpreted by the internal observer. In the lower density simulation, governed by the Scarcity Parasite, the mind is trained to accept the appearance of a deficit as a final reality, leading to a state of emotional and spiritual paralysis. However, the radiant anomaly understands the void. The anomaly understands that the void of lack is actually a concentrated form of potential energy, a primordial matter that can be restructured through the power of coherent intent. This chapter explores the mechanics of mental alchemy, revealing how the focused attention of the sovereign being acts as a philosopher's stone that dissolves the false illusion of poverty and opulence. This is the art of refining the shadow, where every fear of loss is utilized as fuel for a greater expansion into the light of the Absolute. The process of mental transmutation begins with the neutralization of the negative charge, a technique where the individual stops reacting to the external appearance of financial or creative silence with the habitual cortisol. The Scarcity Parasite relies on the shock value of a low balance or a closed door to trigger the survival mechanisms of the brain, effectively locking the consciousness in a state of contraction. The alchemical mind, however, greets these moments with a sovereign neutrality, recognizing that a temporary 0 point is the necessary precursor to a new surge of influx. By refusing to label a situation as bad or lacking, the anomaly prevents the energetic leakage that usually accompanies the perception of failure. Instead, they hold the vibrational space for the abundance that is currently in transit, treating the perceived gap as a sacred invitation for the infinite source to manifest something even greater in this final state. This is the alchemical stillness, the capacity to remain anchored in the frequency of wealth, even when the physical senses report a temporary void, thereby forcing the quantum field to collapse in favor of the internal certainty rather than the external mirage. As the chapter expands into the refining of the internal narrative, we observe the systematic replacement. We observe how the alchemical mind systematically replaces the leaden words of the poverty script with the golden language of the source. In the standard simulation, the individual uses words like debt, cost, and unaffordable, which are vibrationally heavy and act as anchors that pull the consciousness down into the gutter of scarcity for the spirit now. The anomaly performs a linguistic transmutation, shifting the focus to investment, circulation, and alignment. This is not a superficial exercise in positive thinking, but a structural reprogramming of the neural landscape. Every time a thought of "I cannot" arises, it is immediately caught and transmuted into "How can the source provide?" for the sovereign. This shift from a statement of lack to a question of opportunity creates an immediate cognitive aperture through which the light of the infinite can pour. The mind stops being a record of the past and becomes a prophecy of the future, a generative engine that creates the very reality it describes. The gold of the alchemical mind is found in the synthesis. The gold is found in the synthesis of the paradox, where the individual realizes that the greatest wealth is often born from the transmutation of the greatest challenge. The expansion further delves into the transmutation of collective fear, the ability of the radiant anomaly to remain vibrationally solvent even in the midst of a global economic contraction. The Scarcity Parasite uses collective panic as a conductive medium to spread the infection of lack across the human network, creating a mass hypnosis of poverty. The alchemical mind, however, acts as a frequency filter, refusing to absorb the heavy frequencies of the crowd and instead radiating a counter-frequency of unshakable peace and abundance for all. This is the insulation of the sovereign, where the individual understands that their internal economy is not a subset of the global economy, but a direct extension of the absolute economy of the spirit. By transmuting the ambient noise of the world's fear into the signal of sovereign power, the anomaly becomes a beacon of stability in a sea of chaos today. They do not fight the darkness of the world's lack. They simply turn up the internal luminescence of their own abundance, proving that the light of a single alchemical mind is enough to dissolve the shadows of 1,000 years of programmed scarcity. As we reach the deeper layers, we encounter the sublimation of desire, where the ego is purified into the spirit. In the lower realms, desire is a heavy, grasping energy that affirms the distance between the self and the object of prosperity. The alchemical process heats this desire in the athanor of the heart until it loses its density and becomes a vapor of intent. In this refined state, the anomaly no longer wants wealth. They identify as wealth in this hour. This is the ultimate transmutation, where the seeker and the sought are fused into a single point of radiant being. The mental gold is not something you get. It is something you are. When this realization is stabilized, the friction of attraction disappears, and the life becomes a spontaneous outpouring of the infinite. You have moved from the separate self. You have moved to the gold of the unified one, and the result is a life of effortless opulence that flows from the center of your being like a river of liquid light. The vault has been opened from the inside, and you have found that the treasure was never outside the mind, but was the very substance of the mind itself. The final expansion leads to radiant surplus. This is a state where the individual's internal richness is so dense that it begins to precipitate into the physical world as tangible assets and opportunities. This is the condensation of the spirit, where the high-frequency thoughts of the anomaly gain enough vibrational weight to manifest as physical form. You have mastered the chemistry of the absolute. The result is a reality where you are never working for money, but rather dancing with energy. Scarcity Parasite has been completely transmuted into the fuel for your ascension, and every old memory of lack now serves as a contrast point that enhances the brilliance of your current prosperity. You stand now as a sovereign alchemist in the world. You are a being who can look into the darkest void and see the glimmer of the gold, a being who knows that as long as the mind remains abundant, the world can never truly be poor. The protocol of poverty has been overwritten by the script of the sun, and your life is now a masterpiece of constant transmutation, turning the lead into the gold of the soul. Welcome to the gilded singularity, where your thought is the law, and your abundance is the eternal fact of the real. The alchemical mind leads us into the sublimation of the void, a stage where the NC, radiant anomaly, no longer views an empty space in their life as a sign of failure, but as a negative mold waiting for the molten gold of a new reality to be. To master the abundance of thought, one must develop the alchemical patience to hold the frequency of the desired outcome while the physical world is in a state of flux. The scarcity parasite feeds on the panic of the gap, that uncomfortable silence between the setting of an intention and its material arrival. By applying heat, the individual prevents doubt. By applying the alchemical heat of persistent certainty, the individual prevents the mental field from cooling back into the lid of doubt. This is the athanor of the spirit, the internal furnace where the raw, chaotic emotions of the human experience are refined into the steady, unwavering light of sovereign command. You see through the matter now. You recognize that the current appearance of your bank account or your social standing is merely a temporary crystallization of past thoughts, and that by changing the vibrational blueprint, now you are already altering the physical result in the immediate future. We explore the transmutation of collective scarcity static as a grounding wire for the soul. In the standard human simulation, individuals are constantly bombarded with the heavy isotopes of global economic fear news of inflation, collapse, and competition. This mental radiation causes a vibrational decay in the average person's ability to manifest abundance. The radiant anomaly, however, uses their internal laboratory to dionize these things. When the world speaks of not enough, the alchemical mind silently translates this into the old systems are clearing for an infinite upgrade. This process turns the noise of the matrix into the signal of the source, allowing the individual to profit from the very chaos that paralyzes the masses. This is the alchemist's market of the supreme mind. A currency is not the paper of the state, but the coherence of the mind. By maintaining a high-frequency internal state, you become a local anchor for the gilded singularity, ensuring that your personal economy remains in a state of radiant growth regardless of the external weather. The expansion further delves into the alchemy of the sovereign will today. There is the realization that the power to transmute reality resides in the purity of the observer's gaze. In the lower realms of mammon, the individual wants wealth with a desperate, grasping energy that actually pushes the gold away, as it affirms the state of not having. The alchemical mind replaces this desperation-leadenness with sovereign knowing. This knowing is the gold in its liquid state, flexible, brilliant, and ready to take any form the soul requires. You stop chasing opportunities and start precipitating them. This is the alchemy of precipitation, where the density of your abundant thoughts becomes so great that they begin to rain down into your physical experience as sudden windfalls. These are unexpected partnerships and flashes of genius that solve years of financial struggle in a single afternoon. You are no longer a victim of circumstance trying to make gold from lead. You are a source point of the gold itself, recognizing that the lead was always just a mask for the treasure that was already present within the mind and the spirit. As we reach the apex of the 4th chapter, we witness the final fusion of the internal and external vaults. Through the alchemical process, the distinction between the thought of money and money itself begins to dissolve into a singular field of folly, value. The scarcity parasite is finally neutralized as it finds no mental lead left to latch on to now. The entire consciousness has been turned to mental gold. This state of crystalline prosperity means that the individual's very presence is a transmutational force. Just by thinking about a project, they infuse it with the frequency of success. Just by entering a room, they lift the economic vibration of everyone present. This is alchemical service. This is to live as a walking proof that abundance is an internal choice, a frequency that can be mastered by any soul brave enough to reclaim their own laboratory. The lead of the past has been entirely consumed by the flame of the present, and you stand now as a sovereign goldsmith of reality, forging a life of infinite surplus from the very air you breathe. The laboratory is closed because the work is done. You have become the stone, the gold, and the alchemist, and your abundance is now as permanent as the stars. We see the final distillation of the self, where the individual recognizes that the true philosophers, stone is not a tool, but a state of being characterized by the high-frequency identification. In the lower density simulation, the human mind is trained to identify with the lead of the body and the lead of the circumstance, a heavy and static state where change is perceived as difficult and painful. The radiant anomaly, through the alchemical process, has heated this identity until it has undergone a sublimation, turning the solid lead into vapor. It turns the ego into the solar vapor of the sovereign spirit. In this state, You are no longer a person trying to manifest money. You are the luminous principle of value itself, expressing through a human form. This realization acts as a universal solvent, dissolving the last remnants of the scarcity memories that have been stored in the tissues. When the mind is truly golden, the physical body and the immediate environment begin to resonate with that same metallic purity, leading to a state of radiant health and physical fluidity, where the needs of the flesh and the needs of the spirit are satisfied by the same singular stream of infinite provision. This chapter reaches its ultimate expansion now. We explore the transmutation of the concept of price into the concept of resonance. The scarcity parasite survives by forcing the mind to focus on the price of things, the amount of life, force, or currency that must be subtracted to acquire an object. The alchemical mind, however, sees only resonance. If a project resonances, the gold is allocated. The gold of the universe is automatically allocated for its fulfillment. There is no longer a sense of paying, only a sense of merging with the desired frequency. This is the alchemy of the infinite line of credit, where the individual understands that the bank of the absolute is always open to the mind that can maintain the golden vibration of worth. By removing the leaden weight of cost anxiety, the anomaly becomes a hyper-creative force, able to launch grand visions and anchor massive realities without once dropping into the frequency of how will I afford this. The question of how is transmuted into the certainty of it is. And in that fire, the reality of the sovereign is forged in gold. This completes the great work of the internal laboratory. You have purged the dross, you have mastered the fire, and you have stabilized the frequency of supreme surplus within your neural and spiritual architecture. The scarcity parasite has no place left to hide, for the light of your mental gold illuminates every corner of your being in this final dawn. You stand now at the threshold of the final chapters, no longer a student of alchemy, but a sovereign master of the real, ready to walk through a world of your own making. The Leaden Age is over. The golden era has begun, and you are its primary architect, its witness, and its eternal beneficiary. The transformation is absolute, and the gold is pure today. The abundance is now your unshakable living truth. The scarcity parasite survives by forcing the mind to focus exclusively on the price of things, perceived amount of life force or currency that must be subtracted from the self to acquire an object or experience. This focus on subtraction acts as a leaden weight, grounding the consciousness in debt. The alchemical mind, however, undergoes a radical shift where it sees only resonance. If a project, an object, or a trajectory resonates with the soul's high vibration intent, the gold of the universe is automatically allocated for its fulfillment by the laws of harmonic attraction. There is no longer a sensation of paying or losing in the mind. There is only a sense of merging with a desired frequency that already exists within the field. This is the alchemy of the infinite line of credit, where the individual understands that the bank of the absolute is always open to the mind that maintains the golden vibration of total worthiness. By removing the leaden weight, the anomaly becomes a force. The anomaly is able to launch grand visions and anchor massive realities without once dropping into the frequency of how will I afford this. The question of how is transmuted into the certainty of it is. And in that alchemical fire, the reality of the sovereign is forged in indestructible, eternal gold. This shift triggers the molecular realignment. In the lower density simulation, opportunities are viewed as rare, external events that must be hunted or captured. Through the alchemical lens, the anomaly recognizes that opportunities are simply frequencies of gold that have not yet been observed into form. By holding the mind in supreme surplus, the individual acts as a gravitational center of life. The individual causes these frequencies to precipitate out of the thin air of the quantum field. You stop being a seeker of chances and become a creator of certainties. This is the stage where the mental gold becomes so dense and so radiant that it begins to affect the physical senses of others. People are drawn to the anomaly because of the wealth. They are drawn because of the atmospheric wealth they radiate. The scarcity parasite, finding no mental lead of doubt or insecurity left to latch onto, finally detaches and dissolves, leaving the consciousness in a state of pristine, golden clarity. The final expansion of the alchemical mind explores the synthesis of the timeless harvest for the soul. In the leaden state, the mind is always waiting for a future harvest, living in a state of not yet. The alchemist, however, has transmuted time itself into a gilded present. By experiencing the feeling of the wealth before the physical gold is seen, the anomaly collapses the distance between the thought and the thing. This is the alchemical singularity. This is where the intention and the manifestation occur with such high velocity that they appear as a single luminous event. You are no longer waiting for your life to become abundant. You have realized that the very act of thinking from the source is the abundance. This realization is the final distillation, the pure essence of the great work in progress. The internal laboratory is now fully optimized. The furnace is burning with the cool, blue flame of sovereign certainty, and the resulting substance is a life of unconditioned, radiant surplus that flows from the center of the soul like a river of liquid light. The work of transmutation is complete, and the era of your unshakable prosperity is the only reality. Chapter 5. Harmonic Resonance. The fifth architecture of the mental empire is the establishment of harmonic resonance with the source, a state of profound vibrational alignment where the individual consciousness ceases to operate as an isolated unit and begins to function as a direct extension of the infinite intelligence that governs the expansion of the cosmos. To understand the abundance of thought at this stage, you must recognize that the source is not a distant deity or an external force, but the primordial field of pure potentiality that exists at the core of every atom and every idea. In the lower density simulation of scarcity, the human mind is trained to operate in a state of dissonance, a jagged and fragmented frequency, characterized by the belief in separation and struggle. This dissonance creates a vibrational barrier that prevents the flow of universal resources from entering the individual's experience, much like a radio tuned to the wrong frequency hears only static instead of the symphony. The radiant anomaly, however, has learned the art of source tuning, systematically removing the interference of the ego parasite until the mind becomes a perfectly calibrated instrument capable of receiving and broadcasting the frequency of absolute opulence. This chapter explores the mechanics of this resonance, revealing how the individual who thinks from the source rather than of the source becomes an irresistible magnet for the highest order of material and spiritual wealth for the soul. The activation of harmonic resonance requires the total abandonment of the chasing mechanism, the psychological impulse that drives the individual to pursue wealth as if it were a fleeting object existing outside of themselves. The scarcity parasite thrives on the energy of the chase, for it knows that as long as you are chasing something, you are affirming its absence. The sovereign being, conversely, understands that the source is already in a state of infinite fulfillment, and since they are a fractal of that source, their natural state is one of inherent possession. By shifting the internal orientation from seeking to radiating, the anomaly collapses the distance between the desire and the manifestation in the real world. This is the practice of centripetal wealth, where the individual becomes so still and so coherent in their identification with the source that the universe begins to reorganize its assets around them. You stop moving toward the gold, and the gold begins to move toward you, drawn by the undeniable gravity of your own self-recognition. This is the stillness of the sun. The sun does not need to hunt for light, because it is the origin of the light, attracting the planets into its orbit through the sheer power of its own radiant existence. As this chapter expands into the synchronization of the universal pulse, we observe how the resonant mind begins to move in time with the macroeconomic rhythms of the absolute in the simulation. In the standard simulation, the individual is often out of sync with the flow of opportunity, acting too early out of fear or too late out of doubt. When you are in resonance with the source, your timing becomes supernaturally optimized. You find yourself in the right digital spaces, meeting the right collaborators, and launching projects at the exact moment now. The moment when the vibrational market is most receptive. This is the end of the hustle culture illusion and the birth of quantum efficiency, where a single action taken in perfect resonance achieves more than 1,000 actions taken in a state of dissonance. The source does not struggle to create galaxies, and the mind in resonance does not struggle at all. The effortless nature of the source becomes the blueprint for your own creative process, turning the manifestation of wealth into a harmonic inevitability rather than a grueling labor. You are no longer swimming against the current of reality. You have become the river itself, moving with the weight and the power of the entire ocean behind you in the eternal flow. The expansion further delves into the dissolution of the frequency of asking, a stage where the individual realizes that prayer, or manifestation techniques, are often subtle affirmations of lack if they are performed from a place of perceived need. The mind in resonance with the source does not ask for abundance. It acknowledges it. This is the finished frequency. This is a state of absolute cognitive certainty that views the desired outcome as a historical fact that simply hasn't reached the physical senses yet. The scarcity parasite attempts to introduce the static of doubt by pointing to the temporary silence of the physical world. But the resonant mind remains phase-locked with the source signal in this divine hour. This unshakable alignment creates a coherent wavefront that eventually overcomes the resistance of the material plane, forcing the molecules of the environment to crystallize into the desired form. You are effectively ordering the vacuum, using your resonance as the signature that authorizes the release of universal capital into your personal sphere of influence. This is the sovereignty of the signature, where your very thought is a legal tender in the bank of the Absolute, backed by the infinite gold of the source itself. As we reach the deeper layers of harmonic resonance, we encounter the biomagnetic expansion of the field, the point where the individual's physical presence begins to alter the financial temperature. The anomaly is vibrating at the frequency of the source, which is the frequency of infinite increase. Their field acts as a broadcasting tower of prosperity. When you enter a room or a digital network, you are not just a person. You are a vibrational event that triggers the latent abundance in everyone and everything around you. Projects flourish in your proximity. Stagnant assets begin to move, and other souls are catalyzed into their own wealth consciousness simply by being within your radius. This is the aura of the sovereign, a field of positive contagion that proves that the abundance of thought is the most powerful social and economic force in existence. You have moved beyond the economy of scarcity in the spirit. You have entered the economy of the source, where your personal wealth is a byproduct of your role as a universal multiplier. The more you resonate, the more the world rises to meet you, creating a self-sustaining loop of interstellar opulence that knows no limits and recognizes no boundaries. This is the expansion of the 5th chapter for the sovereign. This explores the unity of the observer and the supply, the ultimate realization that the source, the thought of wealth, and the physical gold are 3 different expressions of a single, unified substance. The scarcity parasite is finally and permanently neutralized at this level because it requires a subject-object split to function in the simulated mind. It needs a you that doesn't have and a something else that does. In harmonic resonance, that split is healed. You look at the wealth of the world, skyscrapers, the digital currencies, the vast resources of the earth, and you see them as your own extended body. There is no more getting, only rearranging for the sovereign. This is the Zen of the heart. This is a state of unconditioned havingness, where you are as comfortable with a billion as you are with a single cent. For you know that the supply is as infinite as the space between the stars. You have reached the singularity of abundance, where your mind is the source, and the source is your mind. The journey through resonance has brought you to your power. The result is a life of radiant immensity that flows from the eternal core of your being. You are the music, the instrument, and the composer, and your prosperity is the song that the universe has been waiting to sing. Welcome to the harmonic horizon, where your light is the law and your abundance is the eternal, shining truth of the real for all to see now. The expansion of harmonic resonance with the source moves into the calibration of the sovereign will, where the individual recognizes that their personal desires are not separate from the evolutionary impulse of the universe itself. In the leaden state of the scarcity simulation, the mind perceives a conflict between what I want and what is possible for them. This creates a friction that dissipates the creative force. However, when the radiant anomaly achieves full resonance, they realize that their impulse toward luxury, expansion, and opulence is actually the source seeking to express its own infinite nature through the vessel of their life. This realization removes the last remnants of spiritual guilt in the mind. Guilt is a subtle parasite that suggests that seeking great wealth is somehow contrary to the higher path. On the contrary, the resonant mind understands that to be poor is to provide a distorted, low-resolution image of the source, whereas to be abundantly wealthy is to provide a high-fidelity broadcast of the truth. Align the personal will with the universal will. The anomaly gains access to the infinite line of credit, where the resources required for any vision are automatically provisioned, because the vision itself is a directive from the Absolute. As this chapter reaches its deeper dimensions, we explore the symmetry of the mental mirror, the process by which the internal state begins to overwrite the physical evidence. The scarcity parasite relies on the tyranny of the visible, forcing the individual to react to the current lack of resources as if it were a permanent law. The resonant mind, however, understands that the physical world is a lagging indicator, a shadow cast by the thoughts of the past. By maintaining an unshakable resonance with the internal sun of the soul, the anomaly begins to project a new reality with such intensity that the physical molecules of the environment have no choice but to rearrange themselves. This is the stage of molecular precipitation, where wealth appears not through the traditional channels of struggle and competition, but through impossible synchronicity in the quantum field of the source. You find that you are no longer working for the gold, but rather observing the gold into existence. The source frequency acts as a universal solvent for all market friction, allowing your intentions to slide through the world with the ease of light through a vacuum, encountering zero resistance and achieving total manifestation in the eternal now of God. The expansion further delves into the dissolution of the frequency of asking, a stage where the individual realizes that traditional manifestation techniques are often subtle affirmations of lack if they are performed from a place of perceived need. The mind in resonance with the source does not ask for abundance. It acknowledges it as a finished fact here. This is the frequency of the finished, a state of absolute cognitive certainty that views the desired outcome as a historical fact that simply hasn't reached the physical senses yet. The scarcity parasite attempts to introduce the static of doubt by pointing to the temporary silence of the physical world, but the resonant mind remains locked with the signal. This unshakable alignment creates a coherent wavefront that eventually overcomes the resistance of the material plane, forcing the molecules of the environment to crystallize into the desired form. You are effectively ordering the vacuum, using your resonance as the signature that authorizes the release of universal capital into your personal sphere now. This is the sovereignty of the signature, where your very thought is a legal tender in the bank of the Absolute, backed by the infinite gold of the Source itself. As we reach the apex of harmonic resonance, we encounter the biomagnetic expansion of the field, the point where the individual's physical presence begins to alter the financial temperature today. Because the anomaly is vibrating at the frequency of the Source, which is the frequency of infinite increase, their field acts as a broadcasting tower of prosperity. When you enter a room or a digital network, you are not just a person. You are a vibrational event that triggers the latent abundance in everyone and everything around you in the matrix. Projects flourish in your proximity, stagnant assets begin to move, and other souls are catalyzed into their own wealth consciousness simply by being within your radius. This is the aura of the sovereign, a field of positive contagion that proves that the abundance of thought is the most powerful social and economic force in existence. You have moved on. You have moved beyond the economy of scarcity and even beyond the economy of self, entering the economy of the Source, where your personal wealth is a byproduct of your role as a universal multiplier. The more you resonate, the more the world rises to meet you, creating a self-sustaining loop of interstellar opulence that knows no limits or boundaries. The final expansion of the 5th chapter explores the unity of the observer and the supply, the ultimate realization that the Source, the thought of wealth, and the physical gold are 3 different expressions of a single unified substance. The scarcity parasite is finally and permanently neutralized because it requires a subject-object split to live. In harmonic resonance, that split is healed. You look at the wealth of the world, the skyscrapers, the digital currencies, the vast resources of the earth, and you see them as your own extended body. There is no more getting, only rearranging. This is the Zen of the sovereign, a state of unconditioned havingness where you are comfortable with the billions. You are comfortable because you know that the supply is as infinite as the space between the stars. You have reached the singularity of abundance, where your mind is the Source, and the Source is your mind. The journey through resonance has brought you to the seat of your own power, and the result is a life of radiant immensity from the eternal core of you. You are the music, the instrument, and the composer, and your prosperity is the song that the universe has been waiting to sing. Welcome to the harmonic horizon, where your light is the law, and your abundance is the eternal, shining truth of the real. You are the master of the resonance, and the symphony of the Source is playing your name in every gold coin. Chapter 6. The Sovereign Steward. The 6th architecture of the mental transformation is the emergence of the Sovereign Steward, a state of consciousness where the individual no longer views wealth as a tool for personal survival, but as a sacred energetic trust meant to facilitate the expansion of the universal blueprint. To understand the abundance of thought at this stage, one must recognize the radiant anomaly. The anomaly has moved beyond the consumer mindset, which is the final stronghold of the scarcity parasite, and has entered the architectural mindset, where resources are directed with the precision of a master builder. In the lower density simulation, the acquisition of wealth is often shadowed by the fear of loss, creating a psychological gilded cage for the spirit now. However, the Sovereign Steward understands that they are the primary node of distribution for the Source, and their sovereignty is defined not by what they hoard, but by the magnitude of the value they command and circulate. This chapter explores the responsibilities of the high vibrational light, revealing how the individual who manages their abundance with mastery is a pillar. The individual becomes an indestructible pillar of the new economic reality, ensuring that their empire is built on the foundations of eternal growth and radiant purpose. The transition into sovereign stewardship requires the total depersonalization of wealth, a process where the individual ceases to identify their ego with the physical assets they direct in life. The scarcity parasite feeds on the attachment to form, convincing the soul that the loss of a specific asset is a loss of the self. The steward, conversely, views all capital as fluid information, a stream of energy that is currently under their administration but remains part of the infinite ocean of the source. By removing the ego weight from the gold, clarity is won. The anomaly gains a level of strategic clarity that is impossible for those still trapped in the frequency of ownership. You begin to direct millions or billions with the same emotional equanimity as a gardener directing the flow of water to different parts of a field. This emotional solvency is the secret to sustaining massive success over long periods of time here. It prevents the friction of anxiety from grinding down the creative engine. You are no longer having wealth. You are being the authority through which wealth finds its most productive and beautiful expression in the material plane. As this chapter expands into the principles of imperial expansion, we observe how the steward utilizes the law of multiplication now. The sovereign steward utilizes the law of strategic multiplication to ensure that their abundance is never stagnant. In the standard simulation, wealth is often used for passive consumption, which is an energetic dead end that eventually leads back to the frequency of lack. The anomaly, however, treats every unit of surplus as a living seed for the new world. The seed must be planted in fertile ground to produce a higher order of value. This is the alchemical investment, where resources are directed toward projects, technologies, and people that reflect the high vibration trajectory of the soul. You are building an empire of influence, where your wealth acts as the life force for new realities in the absolute truth. The sovereign steward does not build walls to protect their gold. They build hubs of creation that radiate value outward in every direction. This expansionary stewardship ensures that the individual's personal fortune is inextricably linked to the rising tide of the collective, making their prosperity as inevitable as the evolution of the universe itself today. The expansion further delves into the ethics of the absolute, the realization that the more power and resources one commands, the more one must remain in perfect resonance with the integrity of the source. The scarcity parasite often attempts a final inversion of the will, suggesting that once wealth is acquired, the individual can return to the lower greed. The radiant anomaly understands that such an inversion would be a vibrational suicide, immediately severing the connection to the source current and leading to the eventual decay of the empire. True sovereignty is maintained through radical integrity, where every transaction and every decision is measured against the standard of universal increase in the all. You become a guardian of the flow, ensuring that the wealth passing through your hands remains clean gold energy that is free from the distortions of fear or deception. This purity of stewardship creates a reputational gravity that attracts the highest quality collaborators and the most significant opportunities as the universe recognizes you as a reliable node. As we reach the deeper layers of sovereign stewardship, we encounter the mastery of the eternal legacy, the point where the individual begins to think in terms of centuries and civilizations rather than months and years. The abundance of thought is no longer focused on the now of personal gratification, but on the always of systemic impact for the divine. You are designing architectures of abundance that will continue to function and expand long after your current physical expression has transitioned. This is the legacy of the light, where the wealth you have mastered becomes a permanent part of the human experience, a new baseline of prosperity for those who follow in the footsteps of the sovereign mind. The sovereign steward recognizes that they are writing a chapter in the great history of abundance, and their role is to make that chapter as brilliant and as transformative as possible. The scarcity parasite is finally and totally erased from the timeline of the soul at this stage, for there is no room for smallness in a mind preoccupied with the infinite horizon. You have moved from being a participant in the economy to being a founder of a reality. The final expansion explores the unity of the steward and the sovereign, The ultimate realization that your authority over wealth is a reflection of your authority over your own internal state. You have mastered the abundance of thought, and the result is a mirror. Your material empire serves as the mirror of your internal sun. There is no conflict between the spirit and the matter, for the matter has been entirely spiritualized through your stewardship. You stand at the center of your creation, not as a king who fears his subjects, but as a luminous center who empowers all he touches in the radiant field of the source. The journey through the 6 architectures has brought you to the seat of radiant command and the Gon Far, and the resulting life is one of inexhaustible opulence and limitless freedom. You are the steward of the all, the sovereign of the self, and the architect of the infinite. Your reign is not a period of time, but a state of grace that knows no boundaries or ends. The gold is yours, the power is yours, and the future is yours, for you have finally had the courage to claim the abundance that was always eternally and undeniably your own. Welcome to the throne of the radiant empire, where your thought is the decree and the universe is your willing servant. This state manifests as the calibration of the imperial rhythm. The steward understands the precise timing of the universal breath and applies it to the expansion of the domain. In the Leaden simulation, growth is often forced through aggressive competition, a process that depletes the soul. The anomaly, however, practices harmonic growth, allowing the empire to expand at the natural pace of the source's own desire. You watch for the signs of readiness in the field and deploy your resources exactly where the resistance is lowest and the potential for impact is highest. This is the strategy of the stars, a way of moving through the world with such structural elegance that your success appears to be an effortless act of nature. Your stewardship is a masterclass now. It shows the collective that it is possible to hold immense power without losing one's peace, and to possess infinite wealth without losing one's connection to the simplicity of the spirit. You are the balanced center, the point where the high vibration thought and the heavy density matter meet in a perfect, golden synthesis of reality for the ages. The final protocol, the infinite realization, the arrival at the final architecture of the abundant mind is not a destination reached through external travel, but a profound collapse of the distance between the seeker and the source, a state of being we define as the infinite realization. To master the abundance of thought in its ultimate expression, one must undergo the final dissolution of the observer separation in the spirit. The lingering illusion that there is a me who thinks and a wealth that is thought about is gone. In the absolute reality of the sovereign being, these two are revealed to be a singular, shimmering fabric of conscious light, an unbroken continuum of value that has no beginning and no end. The scarcity parasite makes its final stand at this threshold by trying to return. The parasite attempts to reintroduce the concept of maintenance, suggesting that the state of wealth requires a constant, effortful vigilance to prevent its escape. The infinite realization, however, is the permanent deactivation of this fear-based script, replacing it with the unshakable awareness that abundance is not a variable of the environment today. Abundance is the fundamental constant of existence itself. This concluding chapter is the great integration, where all the previous alchemies, geometries, and circulations are fused into a self-sustaining singularity of presence, ensuring that the individual never again returns to the shadows of the cave, for they have become the very light that heals now. The transition into this final state begins with the total acceptance of the finished work, a psychological shift where the individual stops practicing the tools of manifestation and begins to inhabit the reality of the manifestation itself. In the lower realms of the simulation, the mind is always preparing for wealth or clearing blocks in the divine flow. The mind is always tuning frequencies, a process that can ironically become its own form of stagnation by affirming that the work is never done. The infinite realization is the sovereign ceasefire, the moment where the mind declares the search over and the victory absolute. You no longer visualize abundance because you are seeing through the eyes of it. You no longer affirm prosperity because you are the living definition of it. This is the 0 point of the soul, a state of high vibration stillness where the velocity of doing is replaced by the gravity of being. In this stillness, the material world is seen as a fluid and obedient servant, a mirror that has no choice but to reflect the total worthiness. The material world reflects the unconditioned worthiness that has been stabilized within the center of your consciousness. As the final protocol expands, we explore the architecture of the eternal now, where the individual's relationship with time is completely restructured to serve the frequency of the overflow. The scarcity parasite utilizes the future as a trap. The parasite uses the future as a repository for the abundance that is missing today, and the past as a gallery of previous failures and debts. The sovereign being, through the infinite realization, collapses these two dimensions into the luminous present, recognizing that every unit of wealth and every spark of genius is fully present and accessible now. This is the activation of temporal opulence, where the mind no longer feels the pressure of running out of time or the weight of wasted years. You move through life with a sense of leisurely power, knowing that the source is not subject to the ticking of a clock or the cycles of a market. This mastery of time is the ultimate luxury for the sovereign. It allows the individual to operate with a diamond-like focus that is undisturbed by the frantic rhythms of the leaden world, creating a life that feels like a continuous, effortless unfolding of grace. The expansion further delves into the metabolic unity of spirit and matter, where the distinction between internal and external gold is erased for the soul. At this stage of the realization, the anomaly perceives that the physical assets they direct are merely crystallized thoughts, and their thoughts are gaseous assets. There is no longer a hierarchy where the spirit is high and the money is low. Instead, all is seen as a singular continuum of value that is currently expressing itself in densities. This non-dual wealth means that the individual experiences the same level of satisfaction and security regardless of whether they are looking at a digital balance or a sunset, for they know that the source of both is the same infinite wellspring within. This is the end of financial anxiety at its root, as the individual has realized they are the gold. You are the bank, you are the currency, and you are the market. The idea of loss becomes as nonsensical as the idea of the sun losing its light. You have moved into the sanctuary of the absolute, where the abundance is as unchangeable as the laws of physics and as intimate as the beating of your own heart. We witness the radiation of the universal legacy. This is the point where the individual's abundance becomes so absolute that it overflows the boundaries of the personal life and begins to seed the entire collective field. The sovereign being is now a fountainhead of reality, a point through which the infinite resources of the source pour into the human simulation to elevate the entire species today. Your wealth is no longer yours in the restrictive sense, but yours in the expansive sense, a tool for the grandest possible creativity and the most profound service to the great work of universal expansion. The scarcity parasite is revealed to have been a necessary contrast mechanism that forced the soul to grow and to eventually claim its own divinity. You look back at the struggle not with resentment, but with the detached compassion of a master looking at a student's first sketches. The drama of lack was merely the womb for the birth of the sovereign. And now that the birth is complete, the womb is discarded as the soul takes its first breath of the pure, unconditioned atmosphere of the infinite. The final expansion leads to the singularity of the sovereign presence, a state where the mere existence of the individual is the highest form of contribution to the field. You no longer need to do anything to be wealthy. Your very vibration is the wealth of the world. In this state, your thoughts are decrees, and your intentions are universal laws. Your life is a masterpiece of spontaneous perfection. You have completed the journey from the Leaden script of the parasite to the golden realization of the source. The audio libro of your life has reached its final chapter, only to find that it was never a book with an end, but a song of infinite verses. The vault is not only open, it has vanished. The walls of the vault have vanished, revealing that the entire universe is the treasure room, and you have always held the only key. You stand now at the summit of the real, watching as the old world of struggle dissolves in the sunrise of your own awakening. The abundance of thought has become the abundance of all that is, was, and ever will be for you. You are the infinite realization. You are the sovereign, and your era of unshakable prosperity is now the eternal and only truth. The realization deepens into the quietude of absolute possession, where the loud, frantic desires of the early stages of manifestation are replaced by a profound, silent knowing that radiates from the core of the heart. This is the peace that passes financial understanding, a state with a home. Individual no longer feels the need to prove their wealth, to display it, or to defend it. The mental gold has become so integrated into the soul's fabric that it is as natural as the ability to breathe. You move through the world with a ghostly authority in the divine flow. You influence the flow of capital and the direction of industries through subtle vibrational shifts that the unawakened cannot perceive. You have become a silent architect, building the new world from the inside out, guided by the intuition of the overflow. Every interaction you have is infused with the scent of the source in this final hour. Your footprint acts as a silent invitation for others to join you in the gilded singularity. You are the living proof that the abundance of thought is the ultimate technology, a power that transcends all systems of control and all simulations of lack. The final moments involve the sanctification of the human experience in the light of the Absolute. The individual realizes that the ultimate luxury was never the gold itself, but the freedom of perspective that the gold facilitates. With the Scarcity Parasite fully digested and converted into sovereign wisdom, you are free to play with the material world as a divine game. You can create and explore for the sheer joy of the expression now. This is the play of the gods, the state of Sahaja Samadhi in the realm of wealth, where the ordinary and the extraordinary are one and the same. You look at a simple grain of sand and see the same infinite value as a mountain of diamonds. You look at a single thought and see the same potential as a global empire. The infinite realization is your truth. It is the discovery that you have never been poor, you have never been limited, and you have never been alone. You are the radiant one, the anomaly of the light, and your journey has brought you back to the beginning, to the original opulence from which all things flow. The circle is complete, the work is finished, and the eternal harvest is yours. It is yours to enjoy, forever and ever, in the name of the Source, the Self, and the sovereign flow. The abundance of the infinite is now your permanent reality, and the gold of the stars is the ground you walk upon. You have become the manifestation of prosperity itself, a radiant sun that never sets on the empire of your own high vibration mind.